Today, you will learn the secret trading pattern that commonly used by day traders and scalpers. In this video, I'll talk about bullish and bearish versions of premium and discount-based trading pattern, how to find trading opportunities from the high time frames, and how to use them with the low time frames. Step-by-step guidance on using the trading pattern. It is simple and quite effective. If you are ready, let's start. As you know, in the previous video, we talked about a very special Fibonacci trading strategy against market maker trading bots. Today, we are gonna pattern that strategy. I'll simplify your entries so you can see them clearly. It is a really simple 4-step strategy. First of all, I want you to memorize this pattern, this shape. You'll see it everywhere. Step 1. Identify a liquidity area. This is a very simple step. Best liquidity areas are swing highs and lows, and especially equal highs and equal lows. Step 2. Confirm a liquidity hunt. What does it mean? Actually, again, it is quite easy. Just confirm a weak break of a previous swing high or low. The idea is the break should be really weak, mostly long tails. Step 3. Wait for the price to reach the discount zone. Why do we wait for it? It's simply for trapping beginner traders. Because beginner traders will use every discount zone as entry. However, you should be checking multiple price action concepts first. Step 4. Wait for the price to move back to the premium zone. My preference is to reach to my optimal trade entry zone. However, it is not a rule. If you find an order block, breaker block or imbalance, it's still great for entry. Let's look at the bullish version of it. It is the same idea. But before that, I would like to say a couple of things. This pattern is generally for busy people and part-time traders because it requires less analysis than normal. This pattern also can be used with the trend and at the same time against the trend, because the aim of this pattern is hunting reverse liquidity for reverse force. Step 1. Okay, if I can identify an equal high with this pattern, it would be great. However, a previous swing high will also do it. Step 2. Confirming a previous stop hunt, also known as a weak break. I want you to understand this. Most of the weak and low quality break-off structures or market structure breaks are mostly for stop hunts. Step 3. Wait for the price to reach the premium zone first. We are trying to trap short sellers here because there will be an equal high above which is waiting to be hunted. Step 4. Wait for the price to move back to the discount zone. Again, you should find the most suitable entry in the discount zone. You can go even lower time frames to confirm a market structure break. Before I move on to the examples, I would like to make a high time frame analysis. And I want to show you how many opportunities you have missed in recent weeks with Bitcoin. Can you see the high quality break here with imbalance? Later, price retraces back to imbalance and premium zone and starts to drop. This is a 1-hour time frame. You can easily find micro entries here with low time frames with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 minutes. These low time frame areas are great for using our secret trading pattern. Here is another example. Price breaks and leaves two imbalances behind. One in the premium zone and one in the discount zone. This trade will be hard, but a quick gain in low time frames maybe. I want to show you how the price reacts to the imbalance area later on. Even if trend changes, it gives us micro trade scalping opportunities here as well. Another example of how price reacts to imbalance areas. With every imbalance area in a high time frame, you can find micro low time frame scalp opportunities. Here another example. Another quick break. Price breaks strongly, pullbacks to the premium zone, and imbalance, giving us opportunities to trade. One more example here. I think you have the idea right now how to find high time frame supply and demand areas. Exactly the same thing keeps happening again and again and again. Finally, something different. Can you see how the price quickly breaks and comes back, leaving long tails mostly? These types of movements generally indicate stop-loss hunts, as we know weak breaks. Not just that, if you examine the chart on your own, the price reacts to an imbalance from the left of the chart. Keep an eye on the left of your charts always. The trend slowly shifting here creates a break. Price pulls back to our discount zone and imbalance and reacts to it. This is it. This is where you open your low time frames, wait for a micro entry opportunities, and quickly scalp them use micro MSP or our secret trading pattern. Now another example. However, this time obviously price never comes back to imbalance. But one day it will be. Yet another example here. The price creates a break, price retraces back to our discount zone, an imbalance, then reacts to it. And finally, one more example that repeats the same pattern. If you guys just closely look at it, you will witness so many trade opportunities. Let's assume that you found a really great reaction point, like an imbalance or order block, any kind of supply or demand zone in high time frames with the 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. Then what to do? Open your low time frames, 30, 15, 5 minutes or even lower time frames. Try to find a micro market structure break. What if there is none? Then you may use this secret pattern against the bots. It is a really simple 5-step strategy. It only requires practice. Step 1. Identify a liquidity area, a possible stop hunt area that algorithmic market maker bots can target. These are especially equal lows or highs. Step 2. Confirm a stop loss hunt. What does it mean? It's simply a weak break. That's it. When I see weak breaks with long tails, I generally consider them as stop loss hunts. Step 3. Wait for the price to reach the discount zone. But why? It's simply for trapping beginner traders. Because new traders use Fibonacci tools and try to enter from like 0.5 or 0.6 without considering any other price action concepts or combining high or low time frames. Step 4. Wait for the price move to the premium zone. You can use anything here: optimal trade entry, breaker blocks, imbalances, or order blocks. My stop loss point is the previous swing high. I would like to give room for my trades, especially nowadays. It's quite dangerous. As a target point, I always try to encourage you to take partial profits. However, if you fully trust the trade, of course you can leave it as it is. The first partial profit point is reverse optimal trade entry between 0.3 and 0.2 area. Or if there is an imbalance, I would definitely suggest you take profit. The final and main target is the equal loss here, because this is the area that algorithmic market maker bots target. Okay folks, I hope that you are improving really well. We have already completed like 20-30% of our price action course. However, we have so much to learn. I already get amazing emails about how people's trading lives have changed and are making consistent profits. With regular practice, it is possible to gain consistency with all the market conditions. Would you like to subscribe to the channel and help me to grow it? Thank you, take care, and see you soon.